Good morning, and welcome to the East Brandywine Township Board of Supervisors Work Session Meeting for Thursday, August 2nd, 2018 at 8 a.m. A recording device will be used during this meeting. A reminder of public comment for non-agenda items. Rules for the conduct of public meetings established by Resolution 2001-08. The time allotted to each individual making a comment shall be 3 minutes unless otherwise set by the presiding officer. Additional public comment may be granted at the discretion of the presiding officer at the conclusion of the meeting. We'll go ahead and start today with the public comment for non-agenda items.
I think just make sure that it's clear in the minutes that Mr. Winters is participating via call and that is something that's permitted by the Sunshine Law.
Public comment, non-agenda items. Seeing none, we'll move on. Township Solicitor will talk about the Rouse-Chamberlain Guthriesville Walk conditional use decision.
Thank you. So Rouse-Chamberlain LTD, they're the owner of the property at 1163 Horseshoe Pike. They filed a conditional use application on June 16th, 2017, seeking approval pursuant to Section 399-39B6 of the East Brandywine zoning ordinance in order to develop the property with 15 multifamily dwellings. The project had a name Guthriesville Walk. This property is located in the traditional neighborhood design district, where again, multifamily dwelling is permitted by conditional use. The board conducted several public hearings on March 15th, May 9th, and the last one was June 7th, 2018. There were numerous parties that were granted party status or individuals that were granted party status. I have prepared a draft decision that contains findings of fact, conclusions of law, and a proposed order. I've circulated this draft decision to all members of the Board of Supervisors. The proposed order would deny the conditional use application for failure to meet all of the requirements under the ordinance. And I'll briefly read part of the discussion. Applicant has not proven compliance with all applicable conditions and criteria imposed by the ordinance, and thus the conditional use must be denied. The amended plan does not meet the intent and purposes of the regulations for the TND1 district, which is set forth in Section 399-38 of the ordinance. And it goes through specifically which sections it doesn't meet with respect to the purpose statements. Part of the application also required the board to grant a modification from the maximum build-to line. The amended plan does not place the townhomes buildings a maximum of 12 feet from the right-of-way of Horseshoe Pike, does not help form a continuous streetscape as required by Section 399-38C. Again, the proposed order goes into great detail, specifying in what ways the board believes that this plan, the amended plan that was filed for the conditional use, does not meet several sections of the township zoning ordinance. So as I said, I circulated this to the board. If the board has any questions on the draft decision, otherwise it would be appropriate for a member of the board to make a motion accepting the order based on the decision presented to you. And again, the order is on the last page, page 22, and it says, and now this second day of August, 2018, the board hereby votes to deny a conditional use pursuant to Section 399-39B6 for the reasons stated in this order. The board also votes to deny a modification of Section 399-41B9 relating to the maximum front yard build-to line and thus does not approve the amended plan. The board does not object to the use of the property for multifamily development, but does object to the design and layout of the multifamily dwellings as depicted on the amended plan. So again, it would be appropriate if anybody on the board feels that this is the appropriate order to make a motion to deny the conditional use for the reasons stated in the draft decision.
I make a motion that we adopt the proposed decision and order denying the conditional use pursuant to Section 399-39B6 for the reasons stated in the decision.
And I will second.
I'll second.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Winters.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we will have the board sign that decision, and we will circulate a copy, obviously, to the applicant and to all of the parties of record. So.
Okay, moving on to the minutes of previous meetings. And approval for the Board of Supervisors, July 19, 2018 minutes.
Move they be approved as submitted.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Planning Commission.
Mary, did you hear that? He said he abstained because he was not here at July 19th.
Thank you.
And the Planning Commission, June 6, 2018 minutes.
Move they be approved as submitted.
And I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Old business. We're going to talk about a contract update for the 2019 SPCA.
The several municipal managers met on July the 9th at West Goshen Township with two representatives from the Brandywine Valley SPCA. We talked about several of the concerns that have been expressed since the SPCA circulated a revised contract. We did make some headway with some of the charges that were proposed in the contract. Bottom line is that the SPCA is going to discuss internally some of the issues that we brought out during the meeting and come back probably late August, early September. We'll meet again. They'll circulate a revised contract. They do have several municipalities, I want to say a handful, maybe 6, who have already signed the contract, the original contract that was presented, and depending on what modifications are made, those municipalities will benefit from the revised contract that we're negotiating. So I'll have something more, hopefully by September.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Corbin for discussion of Act 537 municipal survey.
Just want to provide a little bit of an update on the status here of our efforts to reach some resolution on hiring a consultant to help us do the 537 plan update. And as a basis for this, Mr. Pearsall conducted a survey of other municipalities in the area to find out how they handled their 537 plan updates and pricing and consultants that were used. So Scott, maybe you can kind of give us a briefing on the outcome of your survey?
Yeah. The first survey that I did was strictly municipalities of the same size or makeup of East Brandywine Township, and I got very few responses. So we went out to the Managers Consortium, which is a much wider group, and got a few more, a few more bits of information, and to be honest, the pricing that I got was all over the map, anywhere from, I believe the low was $35,000 to a high of $220,000. The problem is that each municipality is unique. They're going to have different needs or criteria. So it was very difficult to try to match essentially apples and oranges. I know that Tredyffrin Township, along with Westtown Township, undertook a significant project, but it was strictly one force main. But it still required significant cash outlay and planning. So, you know, at this point, it's, I think we're matching apples and oranges.
Well, Scott, just to kind of add to your thoughts there, looking at the results from what you found, provided a bit of a range. And Robert Pinger, is that different?
Pingor, yes.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, that's
he's
Westtown.
Westtown.
Yeah.
Westtown,
Westtown.
but they participated with different, I believe, in Wilson.
Wilson Road Force
Wilson
Main.
Road Force Main.
I represent the Easttown Municipal Authority, and that's one of the parties to that. And that's I think there's 10 municipalities that use that Valley Creek trunk sewer. So that was a huge project. They were under a consent decree from the EPA, so that really doesn't have anything to do with what East Brandywine's trying to do.
Right, so, as Scott said, each one is different, and we didn't get an exact match, which we would not expect. But it did tell us a few things. One is that it told us that by and large, the municipalities used their existing municipal engineer to do the work, probably in part because they were up to speed and familiar. Secondly, it gave us kind of the bracket of $240,000 at the high end and $40,000 at the low end. So we have that kind of a spread. We're coming in at just under $100,000 total. So we're kind of falling in that bracket. I'm not sure what more we can do in terms of trying to conduct a reasonableness survey at this point.
Mike, maybe you could comment on the proposal. I'm assuming we're talking about a proposal from Joe Baldaz, if I remember correctly.
Yes, and what he did was he helped us prepare the grant application, so you have a scope of work. So he basically priced out the scope of work for what we need, since our plan is 20 years old.
But my question is, how does his cost structure for professional services relate to what the other townships have experienced with their engineers or with outside engineering firms?
I'm not sure I know. Scott, were you able to?
No, the survey that I did asked for the year the project was completed, who was the firm completing the project, and the total cost of the project, and I did ask for some brief summary of the project, most of which was very brief. We're looking at an overall update of the entire 537 plan, our 537 plan, where some were, I know, East Bradford, for example, instead of updating their 537 plan, they did a complete new 537 plan, where others, as Ms. Camp said, were very focused on one part of a project. So it's difficult to compare what each municipality was doing based on the brevity of their responses.
I think the other price point to consider is that the grant we have cannot fund more than 50% of the overall cost. So the overall price of this can't be less than $80,000. So we know that that's kind of a floor.
So basically what that means is we would need to revise the scope of the project to meet that, or the township would actually pay the additional cost above the 50-50 split.
I guess then the third option would be we could talk to Joe about any nip or tuck that he might be able to do in the scope of the pricing to,
So I think,
sharpen his pencil.
just so it's clear, you had a proposal from Joe that you presented to us, and then I think there were some questions raised by Mr. Winters about it, and this was an attempt to address those questions. Is that
Yes.
my recollection?
Yes, that is correct.
And this is something the township's paying for, not the municipal authority?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
The
This is a
537.
Yeah, I just didn't know how
It's
that.
537, it's not,
Yeah, right, I understand
That's
that,
the
but I,
township's plan.
Right,
And not the municipal authority's plan. But the municipal authority,
although we've let the municipal authority take the lead on.
right. Because they're the most familiar with the sewer system.
Right.
I just didn't know if there was any way to have the municipal authority pay for it, but it sounds like not.
Mr. Winters, you understood all that?
Sort of.
But I think at this point, you're asking for us to authorize Joe Baldez to proceed with the plan, with the proposal?
All right, we're, who else in our area does this same?
All kind of people. Tons of different engineering firms. Yeah.
All right,
So, I mean, we could go procure pricing from all of these, it would be very time consuming and require a fair amount of effort to do that. But we would never be able to get a price. Paying the full grant, we would not get a price less than. Talking about maybe $20,000 here, that would be different.
right.
Those price and what somebody else.
Okay.
Well, I would make a motion that we authorize entering into the contract with Joe Baldez to do the up 537 plan update that was previously submitted.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
All right, new business.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Now we're going to go to the Delaware Valley Health Trust presentation.
Morning.
Morning.
Steve Fallon and Anna Lynn from the Delaware Valley Health Trust. You have a PowerPoint presentation in your packet along with some other bits of information. In the interest of time, we're not going to go through the whole PowerPoint, but we can refer to it depending on the questions that you have. The Delaware Valley Trust, there's actually three trusts. The Workers' Compensation Trust, which was formed in 1982, has 90 public entity members. The Property and Liability Trust was formed in 1989 and has 58 members. And the Health Trust, which Anna and I are the most familiar with, was formed in 1999 and has 154 public entity members in this area, including West Goshen, West Whiteland, Oatsville, Phoenixville, Calhoun, East Goshen, East Pikeland, Tredyffrin, and several others. Really, the thing that makes the trust different and unique from the commercial market is that we're nonprofit member-owned programs. So groups that join our programs become a part owner. They then elect an executive committee of municipal managers, which actually run the programs, meeting monthly with staff and advisors to actually set the direction of the program. And in being nonprofit and member-owned, for example, with the Health Trust, we're able to reduce the administrative expense component of health insurance. The administrative expenses for the Health Trust are about 7 cents of every premium dollar, compared to if you, any commercial insurance product is going to have between 15 and 20% administrative expenses. So we're able to reduce cost and stabilize cost long-term, primarily by being more efficient. We're not building in premium taxes, brokerage commissions, and other expenses that really have nothing to do with the benefit levels of the cost of care, and are able to then invest those in the case of the Health Trust, the wellness, a very robust wellness program, which is geared to identify individuals with chronic disease and get them on a path towards treatment. So we're actually investing money in addressing the cost of care, not just the administrative expense component. Our average increase over the last decade has been about 6%. That's before rate credits, since the trusts are nonprofit and member-owned. In the case of the Health Trust, we have a rate stabilization program where we return any excess premiums. This year, for 2018, we returned $8 million to our members. That money is then used as rate credits for future years. The other two programs both have rate credit programs, but also have dividends. The nature of those benefits are a little bit different than the Health Trust, so they do return dividends to the members as well. So essentially, You know, we're the most efficient financing vehicle for employee benefits and other insurance because of that nonprofit status and the fact that we are returning any excess premiums. There isn't any profit that's retained by the insurance company. So we do match plan design, so in specifically, and there is in your packet a side-by-side comparison of our proposed health benefit plan versus your current plan, and you would see that it is a match. There are a couple areas that are upgrades, but there aren't any areas where the plan would be less, less of a benefit. And we do that, and we're able to provide an upfront discount, in this case 5.5%. Off of your whatever your next renewal would be. And the reason we're able to provide that discount is simply because we're able to, we know that we're more efficient administratively, and so we're spending less on administration. That's more than we can allocate towards claims, with the idea that, again, over the long term, we're going to be able to stabilize your cost and provide a better value benefit plan. I don't know how much detail you want us to get into. We're certainly happy to get into the nuts and bolts, but also want to respect your time and happy to keep it at a rather elevated level. So I'll take my cue from you on that in that respect.
I just had a question. Who in our area would be a township that utilizes your service, like in our broad?
West Goshen, Tredyffrin, West Whiteland, East Whiteland has the non-uniform employees, Cowan, Phoenixville, East Vincent, West Vincent, East Coventry, Coatesville. So we have I think a pretty broad representation in Chester County. We have we cover in that 150 plus public entities, we have over 23,000 total members. Including several counties and a couple of school districts and municipal authorities. So the Health Trust is by far the largest of the programs. It's grown the most, just simply because of the health insurance premiums and benefit costs being such an acute problem for public entities, and so we've been able to sort of stabilize those costs and grow basically through word of mouth. We don't pay commissions to brokers for selling our service. It's really a direct, kind of word of mouth relationship.
And then who decides the payouts, for a claim, for instance?
We contract with Aetna for claims administration and network access. So they're providing basically a TPA service. So they administer the plan that that you would basically direct us to set up. In most cases, it's the plan that a group has when they join the program. We duplicate the plan. Aetna, our operations staff, and Aetna work together to install the plan. Members receive an Aetna ID card, and when the claim is incurred by the provider sets the bill. Aetna, we're taking advantage of Aetna's discounts with the providers. Aetna administers the claim, and then basically, while our program itself is self-funded, each individual group receives a guaranteed fully insured rate equivalent. So it's just like you have now. There's no stop-loss insurance to worry about, claim run-out, any of those types of things. It looks exactly like a fully insured arrangement where your rates are guaranteed for 12 months. But Aetna is actually processing the claims. You determine the plan design. If in future negotiations you wanted to make plan design changes and raise copays or introduce a high deductible plan, that would be something that you would decide, and then you would just basically tell us, hey, we want to achieve some premium savings, so we're going to make some changes. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
In terms of,
Yep.
If a member has an appeal, there's a 3-level appeal process. So the first level of the appeal would be handled by Aetna. The second level of appeal is handled by the trust staff, and then the third level of appeal, if the member hasn't reached a satisfactory conclusion, is an independent review organization. So members have the ability to, take their case to an independent third party, and their decision is binding. Well,
Can you tell us about the network?
Sure, absolutely. the Aetna network and the Independence Blue Cross network in southeastern Pennsylvania, the overlap is, depending on the exact type of plan, but anywhere from 95 to 98%. So we see when we have groups, and most of the groups that I mentioned and most of the groups that are in our program transition to our program from a Blue Cross product, whether it's Highmark or, down in Delaware or Independence here in the 5-county area. There was very little provider impact to the employees. So, and we can, you probably won't be able to get, because you're in a fully insured arrangement with Blue Cross, but if you were able to get a detailed claims run, we'd be able to do a disruption analysis side by side, showing the two networks. Absent that, we can provide provider information within a 50-mile radius or 25-mile radius of the building. But again, in the case of most of those names that I mentioned in the local area, they were almost all Blue Cross groups and transitioned without any real effort. All the area hospitals participate. And so nowadays, physicians are really kind of, the hospitals are sort of the magnet for the physicians. So if you have the hospitals, then you're a pretty good idea that you have the physicians.
So I'm assuming that an individual employee who wanted to make sure that their primary care physician was part of your network would be able to search that information and to make that determination.
Yeah, Aetna has a doc find feature on their website. But in addition, we'd be happy to collect, if you've collected names of providers, we'd be happy to do that analysis as well. We do employee orientation meetings for any group that's joining. Anna and I actually come out and kind of go through the program, talk about the wellness benefits, just real briefly. We pay individuals $150 to get an annual blood draw because the blood is such a indicator that, hey, there's something might be out of whack with your body. So we want people to be aware of that and hopefully talk to their doctor about treatment. So $150 for the blood draw. We pay $150 for a colonoscopy if you're over the age of 50 or if you have a family history. So, those types of benefits, we're actually investing in awareness and creating making sure that individuals are, taking care of themselves. We have a service called Healthcare Blue Book, which allows members to use the internet or their smartphone to search and compare for cost and quality of providers, just to be aware that, hey, where you have a particular service does have an impact on the cost. And there's also rewards, incentives with that program as well. So, we're doing what we can, not just on the administrative expense side, but actually in reducing the cost of care. We opened a on-site health center adjacent to our office in Horsham. We have 2 full-time primary care physicians that are contracted there. We also dispense over 200 generic medications. I know that it's not around the corner for any of your employees, but I think it's indicative of the way that we think outside the box, and we're able to invest in reducing costs long-term. If that model works like we believe it will, we're in the 2nd year of it, we will expand that model and make it available to more of our members.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm just going to get a little bit zoom out context on this. In about May of this year, board solicited estimates from the Divot Trust in anticipation of our renewal at the end of this year. Our budget committee has not yet met for the first time. They'll meet next week, but getting proper quotes and comparing plans needed to happen before the budget committee started meeting. The prices that you see, and correct me if I'm wrong here, those would be the difference between what we're paying for this year and what we would have paid for this year had we had the plan. And that's probably a pretty good indication of the savings we would get in fiscal year 2019, is approximately 5%. But there's, that's not a guaranteed difference.
Yeah, so 6%. So.
What I anticipate here is in the next few months, we'll be able to get numbers for 2019, and staff wanted the board to be familiar with Divot as a provider, and we also wanted, since we have 2 sets of employees, we have the township staff, and then we also have the police, which are represented by a union. wanted them to have a chance to be familiar with the plan so that if we did make a recommendation to switch, it wouldn't come out of the blue. So that's kind of the impetus for today's meeting.
And I'm assuming the union has to approve the police side, theirs.
Well, the document says that we are to provide a plan that matches the current level. So we would very much like the union on board, but so long as the benefits match, we could do it unilaterally.
Got it.
You just can't take a step down in benefits without consulting.
That was the reason for my question about the network, because I think we have some police officers that don't live within, or at least we used to, that don't live within what is the traditional five-county area, and so that can become an issue. Is that still an issue?
We have one officer in the Reading area. He's called his primary care and other doctors, and there's been no conflict. Most of our officers have reached out to their primary care, and I think everyone's on board as of now.
Good, thank you.
Plus, I believe the police previously had Aetna as their provider.
That is correct.
Okay, well, thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're going to go on to the Carlino East Brandywine LP MTF grant application, support letter request.
I had requested a representative from either Carlino or I received a phone call yesterday from Dan Kennedy from Diversified Development Group, who actually wrote the grant or completed the grant on behalf of Carlino. No one could attend today's meeting, even though I asked for that almost a month ago. So it would be my recommendation that be tabled until one of their representatives can attend the meeting to answer any questions the board might have.
Yeah, I have no problem tabling this discussion. The one thing I wanted to point out is, unless I'm missing something, the deadline for submitting the application was yesterday.
And they submitted it, actually, they submitted it July 31st. The letter of support can come afterwards.
Yeah, you're not going to be a
Right,
party
no,
to
I
the
know.
application, they're asking for a consistency letter, so.
Yep.
And I guess that can come after, and if it doesn't come, I'm not sure they'll be eligible for the grant, so.
Yeah, and I had some questions on that as well, so I guess we'll table that and then revisit that maybe at the next and maybe at the next evening meeting. Okay, so we'll table that, and then we'll go over to Rothwell's multifunction copier proposal.
Luke and I met with John Kinch from Rothwell, who provides our copiers and also the service and maintenance. John had simply called to check in with me to see that our current equipment was operating as necessary for the township. And I just asked him if there was any savings to be had with our current equipment, and the equipment's leased. So he looked into that, got back to me in a few days, and said he'd like to meet with me. And of course, I included Luke because Luke is our in-house IT person, and the large format copier scanner is his baby, I'll say. The proposal that Mr. Kinch provided basically would save the township $100 a month in the lease pricing, get us a faster multifunction machine, copier, scanner, fax machine, and also would pay off the existing lease on the large format scanner. So basically, and the reason they can do this is they get incentives from their manufacturers to go out and get new business. So that's one of the reasons that we'd be saving approximately $100 a month. and then we would own the large format scanner. The current copier, I believe, it's 2.5 years old. So in the long run, we're saving some fairly significant money over the term of the new lease for this copier, plus no more lease on the large format copier.
So, I just want to get that clear. So the old one that's 2.5 years old,
Yes.
that stays?
No. Well, no, the large format scanner, both were leased at the same time. The multifunction printer, copier, scanner, fax, and then the large format printer, scanner, copier. We would own the lease on the large format scanner, copier would go away, so we'd own that outright. And we'd have a new lease, it's a 5-year lease term, for the new printer, copier, scanner, multifunction machine.
All right, so the one gets paid off, the one gets returned, the new one comes in to replace the one that was returned.
Correct. And the new one has a couple of different functions, plus it's approximately 10 copies a minute faster.
And what was our old, maybe you said this and I missed it, what was our old lease payment for the other two?
I'm trying to remember what that was.
More, I think,
Yeah, it was more.
is,
I thought you said $100
Obviously.
more.
yeah.
It's $100 more for the two.
Right.
So we'd be eliminating the large format scanner and reducing our monthly cost only on the new multifunction machine for, now certainly it goes out 5 years, but still we're saving for, it's either 2.5 or 3 years. We'd be saving roughly $100 a month over what we're currently.
And the other lease was 5 years as well?
Correct.
Okay.
You have the actual lease?
I do. It's a
Sometimes they have
standard.
very fine, small print sometimes. I know I've had on many occasions, read these types of agreements after the fact and said, oh, well, nobody really knew that little tiny paragraph was there. So I would just make sure somebody's read it because,
I have, it's the same lease as what we have
Okay.
currently. I'd be happy to share that
yeah,
with
no,
you.
again, I'm not trying to interject, other than I know that other municipalities I've worked for, signed it, somebody in the IT or whatever, and didn't realize there was some fine print that, didn't really cover all situations. Like, if there's an issue to year 2, what are your options? Do they come and service it? Do you have the ability to?
The service and maintenance is built in, the consumables are based on the number of copies that we make, and we make, as you can
Yeah,
see,
tons.
a ton of copies.
And you have familiarity with this company, and you've not had a
Yes.
problem with them in the past with so that's a leg up, I know.
Rothwell has been providing that service. We were, when I started with the township in 1994, we had G.E. Richards, which is a huge company. And their service was great, their equipment was great, but they lost the contract with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and basically they went under. So they recommended a firm out of Delaware, and they, quite frankly, were terrible as far as service. John Kinch actually worked for them. He left and went to Rothwell. I'd say we've been with Rothwell now for 8 years.
So you've had good service, which is good.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's important.
Yep, and John, this was not his purpose for calling you, it was just simply, he does check in, I know he checks in with the ladies out front to see how things are going. Certainly he's a salesman, but he wasn't coming here to sell anything. But when I asked the question, he took a look and said, we can save you some money.
Okay.
So I would just like the board's approval for that proposal, and I will review the lease agreement again.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I'll go ahead and make a motion that we base the approval on you guys taking an extra day or two to go through this lease agreement, and if all bodes well with you guys, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
thank you.
Okay, subdivision and zoning applications. The Gerard Manley subdivision.
Chairman Scrivener?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I did not hear.
Oh, yeah,
Supervisor
Supervisor
Winters.
Winters, did you want to vote on the approval of the copier machine?
You still there?
Inaudible.
Jason, are you still there? Yeah, he must not be there.
I think we
Yeah.
lost.
Oh, did you?
Sorry, I had it on mute. I did say aye.
Okay. He
Thank
said
you.
it. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
My name's Gerald Manley. I joined ownership of a 3-acre parcel on Osborne Road.
Sir, can you speak louder, because Mr. Winters is participating by phone?
Okay, is this better?
A little bit.
Okay. Gerald Manley, I have a joint ownership with a 3-acre parcel on Osborne Road. Sits between Osborne Road and Horseshoe Pike, just below the intersection of Osborne and Horseshoe Pike. I currently have a garage on that property. My brother and I, he doesn't talk to me about this property unless there's something that's bothering him. I've tried to, I offered to buy it, subdivide it. No response. I told him I was going to build a garage on it, which I did. No response on that. And the intention was, I went to a lawyer about subdividing the property, filing for petition action. And he said it would take a long time. I really needed to build this garage because I had a bunch of equipment that I used to maintain that lot, and a 14-acre lot, plus my daughter's on a 3-acre lot that has a field with it that needs to be mowed. I have equipment to do all that, and I needed to get that in storage. So the attorney said it's going to take a while, and you're going to lose a lot of the value of the property. And he says, it's your lot. Put your garage on it. You could divide it later if you needed to. Well, I'm at the point where the thing has to be divided. My brother has not reimbursed me for maintenance or taxes for 15 years on that property, and I really need to divide it. Now, when I was planning the garage, the minimum lot size was 1.5 acres, and by the time the garage was built, I find out that that's been increased to 100,000 square feet. So now what I'm looking for is relief on the lot size to be able to subdivide that into 2 lots. I believe you have some drawings of that there. Did they get the drawing from last night?
Yes, I
This
did
one
guess
here?
that.
Okay, it's got the dotted line on
Yep.
there. That was something, that dotted line I came up with yesterday afternoon when I was looking it over, and I decided that's probably a better way to run the property line instead of making that piece going out to 322. They support that as the preferred way to do it, and they supported me. I got their support for subdividing and the relief on the 100,000 square feet last night at their meeting. Now, the problem is I can't go to the zoning hearing board unless I have my brother's approval, or I get approval for dividing the parcel from the county, which is the way it's going to have to go. Now, my attorney said that if I go to the county for the divide that, the lawyer that it's assigned to is going to look at your zoning and say, can't do it. So what I'm looking for is support. I already got, I'm getting support from the planning commission, is looking for support from the supervisors, that I could go to the county and say that the township would support that subdivision, so that I wouldn't, if I didn't have, wasn't able to subdivide it, then the property would have to go to sale probably, and I could lose my garage, so.
All right, so I have two questions. The first question is, if it were subdivided, if the county or whoever allowed it to be subdivided, would you be ownership of one and your brother ownership of two?
That's correct.
And that was my first question. The second question is, I guess, I see Route 322 is one entrance and exit egress point, and I see Osborne is the second. My question is, would the state allow an egress onto 322 at that location? Because then it's kind of a landlocked piece of property if they won't.
He's not going to know the answer to that.
You follow me?
Yeah. Why wouldn't they?
Osborne.
That, we would have no jurisdiction unless
Yeah,
I'm.
I understand
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So,
What Mr. Scribner's referring to is, you would probably have to get a permit from the.
From PennDOT, sure.
From PennDOT,
Yeah, I understand that.
So I'm confused, and I'm an attorney, so I know a little bit about these things.
Yeah.
And I'm not aware of any procedure where the county can subdivide the property.
No, they can't.
Oh, okay, because
They-
that seemed to be
all
what you
the
were
county-
suggesting.
The county would,
When you say the county, you mean the court system, when you
yeah,
file
right,
petition
right.
action?
Right,
Petition
so-
action, they assign a.
Master.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So they couldn't do it, but the township has to do it. I just need to have,
But the township, there are only two ways for the township to do this that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And the one you've already indicated, which would be the zoning hearing board.
right.
And the zoning hearing board is not going to entertain an application unless it's signed by both property
Yeah, you already
owners.
stated that, right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that, I think you're telling us that that is out of the question.
It looks that way, yes.
Yeah, so, the only other way would be for us to change the zoning on that particular parcel, and then that runs afoul of what is called spot zoning provisions.
Yeah.
So that,
I think that what you have to understand is that this board doesn't have the legal authority to grant variances. All they would do, all that they could tell you is that, and again, I'm not putting words in their mouth, but that they don't have an objection to you filing the application with the
right.
zoning hearing board.
Yeah, I understand.
But there's no guarantee that the zoning hearing board's gonna grant that relief.
I know that.
Okay, so I
So-
think he's just saying, board, if he filed an application, would you choose to take a position adverse to it? That's all you can really answer. And then he can do, and I'm not really sure what the court will do with that, but I understand he's stuck in this predicament of not having it seems like you need to do the partition action, and in your complaint for a partition, all you'll be able to do is allege that you went to the planning commission and you went to the board, and neither of those entities voiced any objection.
I've done a number of partition actions, and
Yeah.
I think where you're gonna end up, because the whole partition is what I call an ancient remedy. It goes way back in the common law, and it was when you had a 40-acre farm, the court would decide what was an equitable division of that 40-acre farm, taking into consideration where the house was. So it wasn't necessarily 20 acres and 20 acres. Might be 10 acres and 30 acres to make it
Yeah.
equal in value.
Right.
Your property, I think a master is going to determine is not partitionable, which then leads to the conclusion that it has to be dealt with as a whole.
But, Mr. Fisher, don't you think the court, one of the things they could do is say that this gentleman can keep the property, but he has to pay his brother a certain amount of money? So
Oh,
that the property itself won't be partitioned, it's just,
In any partition action, the master has the choice of doing a private sale among the parties or a public sale of the property. So when you do the partition, you would get an appraisal of the property, and then you would be entitled to buy the property. And of course, since you already own half of it, you would only have to pay half of whatever the appraised value was. So the master could make a recommendation. You could go into the master with an offer saying, here's an appraisal. The appraisal says it's worth X dollars. I'm willing to pay half of X. And the master could make that recommendation, and a judge could sign off on it, basically forcing your brother to sell the property to you.
And after that occurs, then you can come back and
Right.
face whatever
Then-
subdivision application, zoning
Then
applications
if-
you wanted to do.
If you're the sole owner, then you can do a zoning, you can apply for a variance to the zoning hearing board, so you could do the subdivision. But I don't think that a master is going to have the authority to say, I'm going to give lot 1 to you and lot 2 to your brother, and go back to the
Well,
township.
sure, because you don't even have an application filed, and who
Right.
knows what that, I mean, the one thing, sitting here thinking out loud, is that it's tough for this board to give you any sort of recommendation or even a nod of the head to say it's okay, because again, you haven't engaged an engineer to deal with the details of where will these roads be at, where will these lots be accessed? Will you be coming onto Horseshoe Pike? Will you be coming onto Osborne? Will you be able to meet the setbacks for things like that? I mean, I think that anytime they're asked to give an opinion on a zoning application, they're really looking at a very detailed engineered plan in most cases. And only when they see that their engineer doesn't have any objection to it and their zoning officer's okay with it, could they take a position one way or the other. So it's tough for them to do that in this situation. And I think what Mr. Fisher's saying, it probably doesn't help you one way or the other with respect to your partition action. It seems like you gotta cross that hurdle first and see where that plays out. It may be that it plays out that you end up owning the property in whole, and then you can do with it as you please in terms of whatever applications you want to come back to the township with. Or it turns out that the court says your brother gets it, and then you don't need to do anything. He has to pay you some amount. I mean, we just don't know that, and until that happens, it's tough for this board to take any action.
Well,
One of the things, and I've been talking to Mr. Manley about this, one of the things, as he said in his presentation, was if the court would allow the subdivision, as he said, the master may say, well, no, I'm looking at the ordinance and it says you have to have 100,000 square feet for each lot.
But what Jay is saying is that that's not something the court's gonna
Yeah,
do. The court's
okay.
not going to the court's not going to divvy up a 3-acre parcel.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I don't think they have the authority to do that.
They're not going to enter a prospective order that says, if you get subdivision approval, then this is what we will do.
Okay.
So they're just going to base it on the facts that exist at the time the partition is filed. So I think, as it's commonly referred to, as you're between a rock and a hard place, unfortunately.
One question I had.
I've been in that rock and hard place for quite a while.
I understand.
The
I
other
think it's just a
thing,
matter of getting one done before the other. You have to play out the partition action and see what happens.
Yeah, well,
Partition is what happens when you have two property owners and they
Can't
can't.
agree.
yeah.
And
Well,
has just-
that's where I am now.
have all of your correspondence with your brother been via certified mail?
The important stuff, yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
I was gonna say, for a paper trail purpose.
I have the certified letter that I sent requesting, I offered to buy it. I offered to, divide it. And I told him that I'm gonna put the garage on there. No response. And I've gotten no response from him over the years.
My experience in partition actions is that the master that gets appointed generally wants to see something resolved between the parties. So
Yeah.
they're always reluctant to do a public sale of the property
Yeah.
unless neither party is in a position to buy out the other. So whenever I've been involved in a partition action, when one party is willing to put a reasonable proposal forward, when I say reasonable, it's got to be based on some independent, objective appraisal of the value of the property. Now, your brother, I'm anticipating, your brother could argue, well, it's really, he's gonna make it 2 lots, so it's worth more. Well, it isn't 2 lots. It isn't 2 lots until you go through it. So your appraisal is gonna be 3 acres as it sits today.
Yeah, from what I've studied on it, the preferred method was to divide the property if it's divisible. And,
But yours is not divisible
yeah, well,
without zoning relief, so it's, and that's an unknown.
The other thing is looking at this, if it were divided the way that you're planning, I don't know if both properties would be considered equal, with one having ingress and egress to 322 and the other having ingress and egress to a side road. To me, one would be less than the other, even if it was exactly the same square footage.
yeah, I
terms of value.
understand that, and they make adjustments for that. I may have to, well, he's into me for about $20,000 in back taxes and maintenance, so, you know, there's room there to make some adjustment.
Okay, so unfortunately, at this time, there's not much that we would be able to do until the court was already in the process of deciding what they wanted done, and then we would therefore be able to make our determination. The zoning, as we said earlier, wouldn't even be able to occur at this time anyhow.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I understand that. Then all I'm looking for is whether the supervisors would support that.
I mean, if it was an agreement between family, and there wasn't an underdog, so to speak, in this, I would have no problem with it. And if the courts were dictating us to what they wanted, again, I would have no problem.
Well, I think that's more or less what Mr. Manley was looking for, was
Yeah.
there's no guarantees moving forward that
Right.
the zoning relief would be granted. But what he was looking for is if the courts decided to follow this plan, would the township be willing to take a look at an engineered plan to do that?
Yeah, and I'd be happy to look at an engineered plan.
How much you want on that engineer's plan?
Well, I think it's gonna have to be,
There's no, let's just be clear about this, there's no construction plan on either parcel.
That's not the issue. The issue is that you would be asking us to create 2 separate parcels.
Yeah.
And I know you may not be planning any improvements, but at some point in the future, a future owner might be planning improvements, in
Yeah.
which case we have to make sure that is actually a developable property, that those improvements can be made. And that's all part of what the engineered plan would be able to demonstrate.
real quick, are you your current residence, are you the .09 acres that's on the corner of 3?
No.
Parents.
Okay. All right, so fortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do right this second.
What all do you want to, you want me to put together an engineered plan for this? I mean.
No, I don't want you to waste, me personally, I don't want you to waste any time on an engineered plan, because an engineered plan would be putting the cart before the horse. It would be going through the court system first,
Yeah,
and then the court system would tell you what you could or could not do. I don't want you wasting money on an engineered plan at this point, because I don't think you're gonna get your money's worth out of it, to be honest with you. An engineer is not looking out at the best interests of your brother, nor you. It's just doing what they feel is
Yeah.
the best situation.
well, that's the way I see it. It's a waste of time to do an engineered plan on it at this point.
But I mean, I have no problem if you wanted to go through the court system to get recommendations on how, or even a definite plan on how to handle this and then bringing it back to us. I mean, I would have to assume the hardship on this would be family discourse, and,
Well, the
you know,
hardship would be that it was divided under assumed zoning, and I think when you look at the 100,000 square feet, it's not a huge difference, so, yeah, so it could be considered de minimis.
Yeah, well,
I think start the partition action, sir, and based on what the master who's assigned the case, you know,
Yeah.
that, they may come back and say, hey, you know, go back to the board and seek this. But until, I think that's the first step. You really need to get that action filed.
Yeah, well, that's the way I want to approach it, you
Yeah.
know. See whether I have support here for that, and then see whether they'll accept it that way, you know, as far as applying for the partition. Get some opinions on it before I actually do it, I guess is basically it.
and again, the zoning is a separate board, and we
Yeah.
don't have any jurisdiction over them. So if they say yes or no, it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
what our recommendation is,
Yeah.
but
Well, I'm sure that it has a little bit of weight with them, right?
from what's been in the past, I'll be honest with you, I don't think it does, but nonetheless.
Okay. So generally, what would I tell them as far as your support or non-support of it?
You tell them that they're not willing to make any sort of motion on it, that they don't feel it's appropriate to make a motion on that because it's premature.
Okay.
And that you just need to go forward with the partition action and see what happens.
What was that last part again?
Just file your partition action and see what becomes of it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
right.
well, thank you, sir. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be moving on now to the ordinance task force. Authorize the submission of ordinance amendments to CCPC for Act 247 and VPP reviews.
At the Planning Commission meeting last night, the Planning Commission recommended to the Board of Supervisors that the consolidated amendments to the subdivision ordinance, the definitions chapter, the zoning chapter, and also the stormwater management chapter to create a simplified method for stormwater management be submitted to the County Planning Commission for the VPP reviews of those amendments that were authorized under the VPP grant, and also for the Act 247 review for all of the amendments. And before you is are the consolidated documents for those three items mixed in. The definitions are mixed in rather than segregate them.
So when you reviewed this the first time from David Sweet, and when the task force was meeting, they were individually looked at. Some were zoning, some were SALDO, some were Chapter 300 definitions. And when I was asked to review them, I said, I think in terms of the review by the county, as well as your advertising and your hearings, it makes sense to put all your zoning under one ordinance, all your SALDO provisions under another, and with that, we kept the Chapter 300 definitions, and then the third one is your stormwater management, which that one doesn't have to be reviewed by the county, does it?
Everybody I talk to gives me a different opinion.
Okay.
Some say yes, some say no,
Doesn't hurt to send it, I guess.
I
Yeah,
guess. but-
because you were required under Act 167 to adopt that, so it doesn't hurt to have
And
it go back
at
to
the
them.
time, that was the County Planning Commission, because it was being done by all municipalities, it was suggested that that review be done, but
I think the safer course of action is to submit it,
Send it,
and somebody
yep.
can't
Yeah.
come
Send
along
it,
later and say,
exactly.
Yeah.
we didn't do it.
Exactly.
that's
Oh.
fine.
I'll make a motion that we submit the ordinance amendments to the Chester County Planning Commission for Act 247 and VPP review.
And I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Winters? Again? Mr. Winters?
Excuse me? Yes?
Do you want to vote on that? Are you comfortable with sending these ordinances to the county?
Yeah, I said aye.
Okay.
Okay, public comment. We have no ordinance and resolutions for consideration. Public comment on agenda items. Yes, sir.
Besky, 425 Creek Road. So I understand this is just about the agenda, so off topic of my typical questions, the SPCA contract. I'm a huge animal lover, and I think everybody realizes the intention of the SPCA is not for profit, but to help animals. So I'm wondering why Mr. Pearsall repeatedly goes after the SPCA to lower their costs and everything, effectively lowering the quality help we can provide for lost animals and everything.
I believe we've had the SPCA contract.
Yeah, he's
for-
not trying to lower the cost. I've reviewed that contract on behalf of 3 or 4 different municipalities. One of the things that they added this year to the new contract is that they want the municipalities, to name the SPCA as an additional insured. And that was something from a legal perspective that a lot of municipalities didn't feel comfortable with, because that really, the township doesn't have control over what the SPC officers do, and so the township really shouldn't be naming the SPCA as an additional insured. I know that was one of the provisions. So
Correct.
it's not, they're not trying to change the costs, they're not trying to change the services provided. It was legal technicalities that the contract added this year that hadn't been in prior versions of the contract.
Well, that was another question of mine, the DVHIT presentation. You said additional insured, and through the discussion, it seems like each entity kind of has their own policy.
For the Delaware Valley Health Trust.
Yeah.
So what we were talking about with that was putting an RFP out for the healthcare benefits so that we could go through and make sure everybody's considering apples to apples.
Sure, but back to the SPCA, they asked for a potentially additional insured. So even though there could be potentially an additional insured, they could have a specific policy for that additional insured?
I'm not sure.
Two totally different things.
Yeah.
So the contract with the SPCA, what they're saying is the township has to obtain liability insurance that covers the actions of the SPCA. That's something that I personally don't think is an appropriate thing to ask the township to do, nor do a lot of these other municipalities. The DVIT is talking about providing health insurance coverage to township employees, including the police officers. And so, right now, you have a contract that's gonna expire at the end of this year. As part of the budget process, they're shopping around other healthcare providers. DVIT is something that's specific to municipalities and government entities. And they pool the resources of many municipalities and counties, and they can offer lower services, lower costs.
And why is it considered a trust? Because they hold all the municipality money in
It's-
one escrow account? Do they make money off of that?
Yeah, if you want to take this,
Yeah, I'd love that.
take this, because this really explains it well. And I know that
Okay.
2 of the municipalities, West Goshen and East Goshen, fairly recently transferred over to this. And I would encourage you guys to reach out to maybe some of those board members
That's what
and
yeah, it was,
managers.
he did say Coatesville,
Yeah,
Cowan,
take this
West
map, you can have
Goshen, East Whiteland, West Whiteland. So that was one of the reasons why I asked him that, because I wanted to find out if other municipalities are A, longevity, but B, happy with
Happy, right.
what they're doing.
Right.
Now, based on Mr. Pearsall's back and forth with that, he said that it's only required by the Fraternal Order of Police to only give the police the act to match the policy.
So I think the board has the decision, as long as it's a like-kind product to authorize.
But you could improve their health
Correct,
care if you want
correct.
to. Well, don't you think the police and the fire department encounter interesting scenarios where they
Oh,
could
absolutely.
use additional, better health insurance and not the bare minimum?
Yep, no,
Because
and-
that's the requirement.
Understand they don't get the bare minimum.
He just cited a restriction from Aetna or that you have to match the policy. So based on
Yeah, I
that
think you-
knowledge, you can match it or you can improve it.
I
So
think
this
what-
is one of the most successful municipalities there are for money to constituent ratios, and we're putting in developments left and right. I can only see where this township's profitable. I think we can afford extra money for the police and the fire department, because if they're engaging in interesting activities, they need to know in the back of their mind they're covered,
Yeah,
not the minimum.
I'll be honest with you. The policy that I have, my wife's policy, is nowhere near the quality of.
Come in twice a month. They come in every single
I
day.
understand that, but what I'm saying is, my wife works for Vanguard. Vanguard is a very well-to-do company. Our policy is very expensive, and it doesn't cover nearly anything that the township's policy covers. So what's private sector and government are totally different, in my opinion, of what's covered.
It's just interesting. Like I said, out of everybody, Mr. Pearsall interjected that little tidbit of information that it's only required to match it. So by saying you're
All he
telling
was saying is what the collective bargaining agreement says. He's
And-
he's
and
not giving a commentary. He was saying that under the collective bargaining agreement that the police have with the
So
township.
why didn't he say, under the agreement, we can
He did.
improve
That's
it?
exactly what, in fact, it
I
wasn't Mr.
think you-
Pearsall, it was Luke.
I think you misunderstood
I
what,
didn't misunderstand anything. Thank you. Moving on. What is the the 537 municipal survey? From what I understood from that, there was a floor of $80,000 until it reached $100,000. You weren't eligible for a grant. So the way I just understood that is you're making up a $20,000 fee to acquire a grant? Is that what that was?
No.
No.
The grant for the Act 537 plan update was provided by the state, and they approved $40,000. The original estimate was approximately $94,000, I believe. So we're going to look at ways to reduce the cost of performing the Act 537 study.
So there are, as Ms. Camp said, basically any engineer in the area would do that type of work. So how many engineering companies have you reached out to for that?
Well, that was what Mr. Pearsall had stated earlier. He had reached out to all the other townships in the area to find out what they're doing and how they've handled it. If I'm correct on this, we have to, by the grant, can make it an $80,000 project. $40,000 would then be covered by the grant?
we don't have to make it 80,000.
Right, it
but
could be-
it's a
right.
50% match. If we could get the work done for $50,000, they would only give us, the grant would be reduced to $25,000. So that's the way it works.
So you are shopping engineers for the highest price to get the highest grant
I-
match? Is that
No,
what you're
actually, it
saying?
would be the opposite. We wouldn't,
Allowed to do that.
I know you're not allowed to do that.
And they haven't done that. That's not what they've done. And they're using somebody who has familiarity with the system and has a leg up in starting the project.
Okay. And then we were just discussing this subdivision, and isn't that a private agreement between that guy and his brother? But that was a pretty in-depth discussion about that. And I
Exactly
believe
why we
you
didn't
just
do
said,
anything.
if you had an engineer drawing that you could reference, that you would give court support,
I advised him not to go get an engineer drawing until he had court support.
because it's a waste of money. But what if somebody already has an engineered drawing? Are you still gonna give them support to the court?
I would listen to the court's recommendations.
Okay. Well, this particular map has
Going off topic.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 revisions before I even purchased the property.
All right, but now we're off topic and we're not talking about agenda.
Now we're talking about the
We're talking
subdivision.
about Mr. Manley's discussion. If you want, I'm happy to hear that, but it would have to be during the
Oh, it's
non-agenda.
no big deal. It's just, you just literally said that if you were to have an engineered drawing that you could reference, that
Again, I
you
did
would
not say that.
support
I
the
said
court.
if you had the court system behind you, then I would recommend getting an engineered drawing. I would not put the engineered drawing before the court proceeding.
Okay. You're talking then about getting permission from the Chester County Planning Commission? So about Saldo, how are you gonna get the revise municipal stormwater revisions when Chester County Planning Commission didn't approve the neighborhood in the first place?
Mr. Canapesky, you're really not understanding what's happening. You're trying to switch everything that has nothing to do with your property
I'm not
into
talking
something to
about
do
my
with your property.
We're talking
The
about
county
municipal
requires, under state law, the county is required to review any changes to the township zoning ordinance and changes to the subdivision land development ordinance.
Yeah.
These changes must be sent to the county, and the board authorized that occur. Has nothing to do with MGG, your property, Hillendale, nothing.
Okay, well, let's talk about the county. Can we zoom in on this real quick?
Is it something relating to the agenda item?
Yeah.
Nope. System has to reboot.
Okay, is it something we have in front of us right now we can look at?
Well, it's off the Chester County Conservation District Urban Team.
Why don't you just show it to us?
I'd like it on record so everybody can see it. You guys like your editing.
Well,
Every time I'm
while
on
we're
one of
waiting
these
for that,
videos-
if we could see it so we can at least comment on it.
All right, Mr. Pearsall repeatedly says that he has communication with Jim Demchek of the Conservation Team. I printed out a color-coordinated map of Chester County. Jim Demchek does not represent East Brandywine Township.
He did at the time.
Last 2 weeks ago,
No, he,
They often
Said-
change their territory.
said on record last time that you spoke to Jim Demchek last month. I have Jim Demchek's letter. So we just went through a massive rainstorm last week and everything. You said you surveyed municipal water. The NPDES person, there's a sign at that development that says, call this number. I can call it right now on speakerphone, it goes nowhere. So if you guys, on the agenda, you're supposed to be discussing stormwater management, and absolutely nothing's been done about it, and the person who the township manager keeps referring to isn't even in this jurisdiction.
Yeah, stormwater wasn't discussed today.
You just said that
It
you
was an
have to-
ordinance. It was a change to the stormwater ordinance. We weren't talking generally about stormwater within the township.
All right, we're up
Specific to an
now.
ordinance.
Supposed to talk about changing ordinances when you don't even know the person who's in charge of enforcing it in this township.
Okay, well, we're up now, so is this what you wanted to show us, the,
Well, can you get some clarity there? See the color? Jim Demchek, tan. West Brandywine Township, East Brandywine Township, blue.
Joseph Franco. The change was made 2 months ago. Mr. Demchak was in charge of East Brandywine Township.
See here, Scott, here's Chester County
How
Water
is
Resources.
it relevant, Mr. Canapesky?
This
What does
came
it matter?
from-
How is it relevant?
How
So
is
now
it
the person
relevant?
changed.
What do you
Is that
mean,
related
how is
to an
it
agenda
relevant?
item from
The person
today?
who's supposed to be reporting these issues and everything isn't in contact, Joseph Franco. So what's the difference if West Brandywine Police or East Brandywine Police are here? What difference does that make?
all right, so we're off topic again. Is there anything else for today's agenda?
I think we're good.
Okay, anybody else for public comment of agenda items? East Brandywine Fire,
Actually, Kyle, I don't know how I was late by a couple minutes, so this is a non-agenda item if you're so inclined to have me say whatever I had. If not, I understand I was late.
what was it pertaining to?
The fire hydrant right in front of the fire station.
All right, well, that's a public safety issue, so absolutely, go ahead.
Okay. As you know, their signs are up that the road's gonna be closed, and they're addressing the water line that, with the fire hydrant. When our fire chief contacted the, project manager, we had asked, previously that that fire hydrant be moved back a few feet because it is a safety issue when we go to, fill the fire trucks and whatnot. Now we're up against the 23rd hour that the project's about to go, in start, and the project manager said, hey, we're not addressing that fire hydrant at all, we're just addressing the pipe. And
Is
we were-
that's the end, that's that same one?
The same one that we thought that once they put the pipe in, they were back the fire hydrant up since it's a safety issue. He said, all I'm doing is connecting the pipe from point A to point B. And I didn't know if we could somehow put,
Is he proposing to reconnect the fire hydrant to the?
he's gonna reconnect that fire hydrant, but leave it in the same spot.
This is the one that was getting the
Yeah,
sediment in it?
I know.
And what we had said was, it's gonna have to be moved when they do the intersection changes and whatnot, and can we change that hydrant? And so I didn't know if there's an avenue for us to put some last minute pressure on them or not. If not, it's gonna stay the same spot.
I discussed that with, I can't remember the name of the project manager, and they said that they'd already been, or you'd already been in touch with them, and that was not part of the project. So,
That's why I'm here today, Scott, because we had called them and they said, yep, it's not part of the project, and anybody who puts their, goes to fill
Kristen
that hydrant.
recommended that we
Call
contact.
Greg Carey.
Yeah, so why don't we try that?
All right, so we'll reach out to Greg Carey.
That's all we're asking.
Yeah,
If it
yeah.
can't be done, we understand, but it is really a safety issue when you go to use that hydrant there.
And
You're
just
right,
so
it's
we're
important.
clear, are you guys talking about diverting it left to right, front to
Straight
back?
back.
Straight back?
Longer pipe.
Yeah.
And a
look,
longer
from
trench.
Longer back.
Well, it'll probably be on an angle if I'm,
Well, the hydrant sits right at the corner of our property, and if you see the marquee, we had proposed that the hydrant go back to the beginning of the marquee ground.
all right, so Scott, what I would ask is with any correspondence with Greg, if you could also include a copy and a contact for the fire
You
department.
guys have like or we could even do an aerial, we could print an aerial, and you could do like an X of the current location and just sort of show, because I think Greg will want a visual, and that way Scott can email it to him.
You just want it in front of the, or next to the sign.
Yeah, just straight back, farther off the road.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments on agenda items? Seeing none,
Make a motion, we adjourn.
and I second.
We don't have any announcements? Did we have any?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.